Thank you so much. I think the word exciting was a good one, but first, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to come here and talk to Michael and about the floor. I think it is an exciting opportunity, and I really enjoyed that discussion. I'm sure everybody got a lot out of that. I represent a coalition of UK-based INGOs mainly, many of whom their representatives are here in the room. And we've been working for 11 years. Our vision originally was to end the outrage of child poverty. But in the middle of the 2000s, for various reasons, we focused entirely on social protection. One reason was that in 2005 we commissioned a report. All our agencies worked all over the world and got a total of 4,000 children to write their dreams for 2015. And we were deeply shocked that really top of the list, the children dreamed of having a family that could get together because its members weren't separated and spending 24 hours a day just getting little bits of money together for existence. So one of the recommendations of that report back in 2005 was that children living in extreme poverty should be targeted with direct measures in addition to sectoral expenditure such as health and education and indirect measures. And at the same time, as Michael said, Peter Townsend was a person speaking about child benefit internationally. We were child-focused agencies, but we work significantly with HelpAge International, who, as we've heard, have focused on pensions. And we found that a group of NGOs focusing on the life cycle could come together. And we decided in 2006 to focus on a campaign on social security. And we drew up our first objective then in 2006, was to campaign for the realisation of the universal right of everyone as members of society to the right to social security through national effort and international cooperation. And just for a moment, to frustrate Rachel and possibly sound naive, the other thing that came to our minds so strongly then, many of us were from rights-based children's organisations, that knew our convention, we thought, back to front. But we thought, why haven't we been concentrating on the two articles that talk about a child's right to social security and an adequate standard of living? And we realised with horror it was because we'd accepted the general consensus, the economic prevailing consensus during the 90s and the 2000s, that it couldn't be afforded in developing countries. Now, I know that's still a big question, but I thought Michael's answer. So I just want to, having thought through your presentations, your discussion, there are just 4 points that come to me that I would like to dwell on. I know I can't dwell on them in 2 minutes, but just emphasise. One is, I think, to keep in mind, it came up interestingly in one of your last answers. It is a right in itself and a means to ends. But I think in the last few years we have seen the instrumentalists gain the upper hand. You know, we're allowed to talk about social protection if it's food security and nutrition and climate change and the environment. But at the same time, there are people with rights, and in particular, children and older people and some people with disabilities who cannot work. And the idea that they should be expected to work to gain an income or to support their grandparents or grandparents support the children really it goes back to why those conventions were put in place. So I'd like to say that it's so refreshing that we're coming up to a recommendation that is going to embody those rights again, and then we can move on to the implementation. So the 2 points, it's a right in itself. There are particular groups of people who can't work, who need income security that we've got to provide for. As you mentioned, there is this big question, the tension between flexibility in a blueprint and what is ownership and what isn't. But you know, I think in the recommendation, your phrase, tailored, I think, social protection floors, plural as you said, tailored to national circumstances, gives us, you know, how we can move forward. And if I may, Rachel, I just wanted to quickly remind people who may have come to an ODI meeting here a few years ago where your speaker was brought over by our coalition and HelpAge, Sida Bumba, who then was the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Security in Uganda. And she's a very formidable woman. She later became Minister of Finance. But she sat downstairs in your bigger room and said, I am so fed up of donors and their consultants and NGOs giving me different what I should concentrate on. So I did my own research. And she found that the people, she said, I've got such a tiny budget, you know, what on earth am I going to spend it on? And she actually found that it was larger households with children. But her point was, the point that you've been making, you start somewhere, you get it accepted by government, by people who will push it, and you start with what you can afford, and you build it up as you redistribute, as your tax base extends. So I think the way the recommendation brings in the flexibility and enables to get over that tension between what is a blueprint and what is being forced on people, and what can be developed and negotiated through a consensual process at national level. And my fourth point, quite obviously, is how do we keep civil society engaged in this? This has been our coalition's perhaps prime objective in the last 10 years. Well, I'm sorry, since 2006. We've worked particularly in Africa to support local civil society, understand the issues. You know, we are all here struggling with these concepts. We've brought them together, and we went through the whole process of what was known as Livingston 2 Windhoek, which became the other SPF, the Social Protection Floor. The AU ratified that. All governments in Africa ratified that early 2009. And civil society was really fully engaged in that process. And I think our challenge now, as you've both said, is how do we maintain that civil society engagement at national level? How do we support them? How do we bring them together so that they don't make it just, or we don't, which, you know, we fall into this, it becomes a shopping list. And we all fight whether it's gender first, or old people first, or children first, or Labour first, or it's Labour first, or, you know, we have to avoid this. And again, it's getting a consensus on the starting point, the minimum package. And I still believe that that's the way forward. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity.